Welcome. Alex is the CMO of Crossbeam. Alex is based in New York, has over 20 years of marketing leadership experience globally. He is an engineer turned marketer, always an interesting route, has held CMO roles in a number of high-growth software companies like NetDimension, Support.com, Chartio, went through several acquisitions, and he is currently, as I mentioned, the CMO of Crossbeam. Also with us, pleasure to introduce Andrew Ermogenous. Andrew is currently a sales leader at Atlan, where he helped take them from 0 sales reps to 15 and supported double-digit growth in his first 4 years. Prior to Atlan, he was the co-founder of a predictive analytics startup for financial institutions, which was acquired by a Vista Equity portfolio company. He spent his entire career in early-stage startups in the ML and the cloud infrastructure space. So welcome, Andrew. And Eric Smith. Eric is currently the head of global partnerships at Pattern, the largest seller on Amazon, where he generated over $1.5 billion in quality pipeline in under 3 years. So some of that and some of those nuggets we'll actually be diving into here today. Previously, he served as VP of Business Development and Partnerships at Shopper Approved, where he helped them to become a 2-time Inc. 500 company. Eric has over 15 years of experience in launching and leading high-performing teams across sales, biz dev, and partnerships. Eric, Alex, Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. It's very exciting.
Amir?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, super excited to dive into the topic of the future of Outbound, an ecosystem-led approach. To kick off, I'd love to hear from you all. Why? What is not working with Outbound? Why? So why are we necessitating this conversation around an ecosystem-led approach?
I'll kick things off.
That's
I think all of us were waiting to break the silence here. So I've been in sales for over 20 years now, and there's probably a lot of people on this call that have been in sales for just as much time as I have been, if not more. And I think we've all seen the approach go very much from product-centric to buyer-centric over the years. I think we all remember the days of, I remember working for American Express credit card sales for businesses. And I remember having a quote of, I think it was 400 cold calls a day. And I'm trying to even put that into like my mind as to what I was doing day in and day. I don't know if I even ate like in an 8-hour workday. I think that's all I was doing. And coming home with a 2% conversion rate and hearing my manager basically say like, that's good, like you're doing good having a 2% conversion rate. And that is sad, I guess, to look back and realize I spent a majority of my early sales days doing that. But now, as we see where we are today with individuals having so much information available to them, we've shifted into this world of being buyer-centric, where it's no longer trying to like putting your product in front of someone as fast as you can before the next person. I just don't think works anymore. I don't know how many emails and cold calls everyone on this call gets on a daily basis, but I think we've now just gone from maybe that subject line sounds interesting, I may open it, to that subject line is clearly not personalized. They don't know me. This is just another cold email. Delete before you even read probably the rest of the subject line. So it's just been interesting over the years to see the type of buyer we've all become. And it's going to be interesting in the years to come as AI comes into things, how much more personalized people expect these outreach strategies to be.
Yeah, I would agree. Our head of demand gen told me something more recently, 12 months ago. He said, I view email as just a free ads channel. And so he's basically, and Alex, you could probably relate as a CMO, but basically you treat email as, and obviously that's in a marketing context, but I think the same thing applies in sales, which is the conversion rates are basically the conversion rates of ads on the internet, which is kind of crazy as compared to even 5 years ago, where outbound at scale worked really, really well. And I think the bar, Eric, to your point, is very, very high on outbound now. Like the only thing that even maybe gets a response is, hey, I listened to a podcast with your chief security officer and he highlighted these 3 risks. And I imagine your CEO, Mike, has a similar point of view. And do you think your team would be open to a discussion on how we can specifically help with XYZ? And like, by the way, I'd love to, like, it's just this like very, very intensely deep and detailed outreach that will likely, and AI will help, of course, but that level of detail is just the bare minimum, and even that probably doesn't always get responded to. Like I think we look back at some of the emails we've sent, we're like, that was a really good email, and like multiple personalized emails and didn't even get a single follow-up or even an open.
I mean, what fascinates me is how many people are still doing outbound, despite like all of us saying that the buyer has all the power. 2/3 of the buying cycle are complete before even the vendor is contacted. It's amazing how many people still are doing outbound. And I looked at a recent stat from EBSTA. 42% of pipeline is generated by outbound, but only 28% of revenue is actually generated by outbound across companies. And outbound has by far the worst sales velocity by an order of magnitude than any other perceivable channel. So it perplexes me how people are doing it. And, maybe want to take a hard call here that, cold outbound is dead and it's not working. But for people doing it, I want to understand like what is working, right? And I think that's part of why we're here. But from the audience, if you guys are using outbound in a way that makes sense and you're seeing some conversions or you have some tricks, please by all means share. As a marketeer, outbound can get the signal wrong, so you get something that doesn't apply to you, or you can get the wrong messaging, or you can get both wrong. And you talked, Eric and Andrew, you talked both about conversions and they don't convert. But as a marketeer, it damages your brand as well, right? So it has this, intangible effect on the brand that I don't want to underemphasize. That even in the future, like if I'm ready to buy, probably I've written you off because of that, irrelevant communication that I received, or that irrelevant ad, as Andrew says, and it doesn't apply to me. So very, very interesting.
That's actually a really good point. One last thing I'll end on here, because I know we're going to talk about a lot of things here, Sophie. So you bring up a really good point, Alex, in that going back to my original point around how much information we have at our disposal today. If you're sending any form of outbound messages about your company, about what you do, it takes someone now, 10 seconds to do a quick search on your organization, who you are as a person, as far as like if it's John Smith sending these cold emails, what does your LinkedIn profile look like? Who are you on Instagram? What do you post on TikTok? What does your company believe in? What are your values? Who are you working with? And then also like, who are you partnered with? Today, businesses want to know that you have a tech or a service that complements what they're already using. And so within a short amount of time, if they see who this is sent by, it doesn't take them long to quickly review who you are and who your company is. And that very well could be detrimental for the possibility of meeting with them in the future if they automatically get a bad taste in their mouth about your company, about who you are. And a lot of times that we always say, right, that first impressions are everything. And an outbound, like, you very well could put a bad taste in someone's mouth if you're not dialed on your approach. And I know we'll talk more about this on that. So I think that's very good to call out that like people are recognizing and noticing who you are fairly quickly when you're sending this to people's inboxes.
Definitely. People certainly are. And it's something we've talked about a lot at GTM Fund. GTM now recently actually just launching Operator just around outbound and how we really need to rely on different, more unique signals, and ecosystem creates that. So I'm curious then, why an ecosystem-led approach? And Alex, I might pick on you here, being at a company that is ingrained in the product itself, in addition to yourself, just around how would you define an ecosystem-led approach, and what are some expected metrics that we might see from that?
Let me unmute myself first. That is a great question and a good lead when talking about ecosystems. Trust is something that buyers are looking when they're buying today. And how do you scale trust? It's likely through ecosystems. So the ecosystem-led approach is operational trust at scale. And really what we mean by an ecosystem-led approach is it's a true go-to-market motion, right? It's not a funnel, it's not a tactic. It's something that you need to have ingrained to be able to attract, convert, and grow customers by leveraging your partner ecosystem. What fascinates me about an ecosystem-led approach is that first and foremost, it is unique to your company, right? No other company has the footprint in the tech ecosystem that your company has, right? So you're tapping on an asset for the company. Secondly, it's scalable. The more you scale and the more you build your ecosystem, the more opportunities you have to use it and leverage it. And it's also very efficient. The unit economics are really best in class from what we're seeing. Companies, and we do every year a report around the partner ecosystem, and companies are reporting that ecosystem deals are 53% more likely to close, and deal close at 46% faster by relying on your ecosystem. And companies that have other partner solutions are 58% less likely to churn. So it is something that touches all stages of the bow tie funnel, if you want. And the unit economics are there, definitely. And this year, we've noticed like a lot more discussion around ecosystem-led growth, not in the form that we should be doing it, but hey, we're convinced that this is something that's working better than other channels or other go-to-market motions. But how do we do it, right? What are some of the tactics, the playbooks, the strategies that we can apply to that? And I think both Eric and Andrew have some wonderful stories, since they both do use ecosystem-led approaches, which I'm very excited to hear from them.
Yeah, I think we're lucky enough that we are an integration product. So the more partners that are involved in our deal, the better, and the bigger the value prop of our product. And we're also like a systems integrator driven rollout. So we partner with a lot of GSIs and smaller boutique shops. So the ecosystem of potential people we could partner with on any given deal is pretty vast, I'd say. But just to give some data points, we've been going after quote unquote outbound for probably 18 months. The first round was, I would say, fine. Like we got some engagement, we built some pipeline, but to your point, Alex, I think that it didn't convert, or when it did, it took a lot longer. This year we hired, and I can't take any credit for this, just to be clear, but we hired 2 former SDRs who their sole focus is ecosystem and partnerships, and happy and proud Crossbeam users. A nice plug for you, Alex. I hope to be on your website. But so their entire job is driving pipeline via partners. That could be ISVs, it could be SIs. And we started this year with really no clear motion in place. And we'll probably end the year having it be like a $5 million channel for us from a pipeline perspective. And it's strong pipeline, I think, is the important thing. It may be quote unquote outbound, but it's accelerated and aligned to the company's vision. And you just get so much more insight from a partner, because it's usually their customer. So they intimately know their problems and their challenges. And maybe just to tie it all up, probably our most successful deal, and I can talk about this publicly because they talked about it publicly, was General Motors. And they presented Atlan. We're lucky enough that they presented Atlan at the Databricks conference. But the way they presented Atlan was Databricks plus Atlan plus Immuta, another partner. And they were presenting a partner-driven solution for their data insights factory, not a here's what Databricks did for us. It's here's the business outcome that we drove with all these different solutions. So we're all in on it, is a short answer.
And Sophie, there might be a lot of people. Oh, Alex, you have something else?
Just a quick comment to that, because we're seeing that a lot. I think something to note is that buyers are not buying single pieces of software anymore; they're buying stacks of software. So, Andrew, what you're describing, the Databricks plus their partners, that's what General Motors wanted and needed, and that's where they find value. That is very important, and we're seeing it more and more. This, I'm buying a stack to solve the problem, and I'm not buying a monolithic piece of software. So it is very important that all the elements of the stack work together, which is where the ecosystem also plays. Sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to cut off.
No, that's actually it actually piggybacks really well with what I was going to say, which is the fact that the old ways of doing things and kind of closing the circle on that, and then obviously introducing this ecosystem-led conversation, is the old ways of doing things and the ways that many businesses are still doing things to drive pipeline is this one-to-one approach. And the one-to-one approach for any company nowadays, they want to feel like the thing they're being sold is something that complements something else. We're living in a world now where we're all so networked in so many ways that we want to feel a part of something bigger. And same goes with our personal lives, and same goes with business. And being like having that, just network truly work for you when you try to sell someone one-to-one and it seems so left field, it almost leaves you thinking like you're almost like you're in the dark. And I think with a lot of people on this call might be thinking, so what is an ecosystem led approach? Kind of what does that actually mean? I think that's kind of what we're saying, is that these businesses want to feel like they have an alliance with their entire tech stack, with the entire suite of solutions they're using. And it's truly a strategy where companies can leverage a broader network and know that what they're adding complements something else.
It's a really great point. And I popped it in the chat, but just to call this out for everyone on the call today, we're really blending different perspectives. So everyone's approaching this from different functional perspectives with organizations that are employing an ecosystem-led outbound approach. So you'll hear a little bit more of a partnership perspective from Eric, and a marketing perspective from Alex, and a sales and overall perspective from Andrew. So keep that in mind too as you're listening to the narrative and direction that we go. Andrew, what kind of results? I mean, your organization is also employing this ecosystem-led outbound approach. Why is it so bullish on this approach? What kind of results are you seeing?
Yeah, I think probably like 70 or 80% of our outbound quota. Now I'm confusing, when should I use outbound or ecosystem led? I'm not sure which word to use now, but 70 or 80% of our non-inbound pipeline is from partner, and I definitively think it's the best way for us to double down on our non-inbound channel. And we actually, what we call it is field generated pipeline. So that's inclusive of kind of traditional outbound plus partner driven. And it kind of all goes to show that like we as a company are rallying around this concept that the field is generating their own pipeline.
Makes sense. And Rory just popped in a great question to the chat. Hey, Rory. That is a great segue actually into the next bit of conversation, which really we want to understand, like, what is that kind of definition of ELG? And then we want to get super tactical. So diving into how everyone's actually executing this. But before we do, just defining that ELG a little bit more. Question from Rory here is, how do partner leaders and companies ensure ELG doesn't become the next overused or failed model, like pure outbound, predictable revenue model? The tension between delivering results and growth and maintaining the integrity and health of the ecosystem seems to be a bit of a challenge, and people similar to himself in that challenge. Alex, I might direct this one over to you.
Yeah, I can take a crack on that. And Rory, thanks for asking that. It is very, very top of mind. In my experience, when ELG fails, it's not a fault of the partnerships team. When ELG fails as a motion, it's the fact that the rest of the functions in the organization don't really understand or know or are willing to work with a partner ecosystem. And I would say something a little, controversial here, in that it takes education for a CRO or a CMO or even a CEO to understand what it means to work with a partner ecosystem. Because we talk about outbound, but the math behind outbound, like how many SDRs do I need, and how many accounts do they take, and what's the conversion rate, and what goes to first meeting, et cetera, this is elementary math for a CRO. But to your point, Rory, the math behind an ecosystem and how you maintain an ecosystem and what are the time frames and the KPIs and when they come in, that is not yet widely available. So my advice to companies is make sure the CRO, the CMO, the customer success team, even the CEO, they're bought in the fact that we do have an underutilized asset, which is the partner ecosystem, and we can all benefit from that. This is not something that the partnership team can solve in a silo. This is my 2 cents, and companies that are doing great with partner ecosystems, and every function is actually leveraging the ecosystem, getting data, informing their strategies, whether it's marketing or sales, or customer success, retention, et cetera, or revenue operations. We're seeing every function knowing how to work with ecosystem. So it's a little bit on us. It's a little bit on myself to educate every functional leader to prioritize that and know how to work with ecosystem.
If I could add one thing, I think it's important to build a human level relationship before asking for something. I think everyone on this call would agree that if someone reached out to us asking for a favor and we never met them before, we're likely not inclined to do a favor. And so coming from a place of giving first, without anything in return is important. And so as an example, we partner really closely with Snowflake, and a lot of times we're more just bringing context on the customer and insight without necessarily having an ask. And then it kind of pays dividends 3, 6, 12 months down the line when they remember you and they hear something at their customer, and then they want to bring you in. And yeah, I agree, Steve. It is obvious, but sometimes those are the most important points.
Well, when you bring up a good point, Andrew, like I think like 6, 7 years ago when I started getting into partnerships, I just wanted to believe that I'm a likable guy, I'm friendly, I smile a lot. So of course, if I ask this referral partner for an intro, they're just gonna give it to me because they like me as a person. And I'm learning now, especially working for a data company, like Pattern, yes, we do sell a lot of products on Amazon with the brands we partnered with, but at our core, we are a data company. And kind of going to that tactical, Sophie, what I'm learning now, and one of my favorite questions that my partners oftentimes ask me, and if they don't ask me, I have to kind of question if this is going to be a strong long-term partnership and relationship. But if they don't ask me, like, why would this company want to talk to you? I feel like that's a red flag, and I respect that, because I want to be able to present to whomever's trying to make that referral for me, leading partnerships, that I have something to offer that company more than just a rev share to the partner making the intro, or more than just like us doing the reciprocity thing, kind of sharing leads back and forth. I want to present a use case to that partner as to why it would make sense for them to make this introduction based on data and based on insights that will truly complement what that vendor is doing for that company. And the more that we can do those type of business cases, the more we not only, I don't know, probably impress the brand, because it goes back to that ecosystem and network. They want to have solutions that kind of complement each other. But it builds a lot of trust, not just with the partner manager you're working with, but to their leadership team, to say, oh, like Pattern's got our back. Pattern's going to make us look smart. They're going to put us in the driver's seat. They're going to make us look really good at the end of the day because they're helping a brand in a way that we otherwise couldn't do. And they're bringing it to the table with data and stuff to actually back it. And then to follow up on that, it's one thing to get an intro It's another thing to follow up with that partner who made the intro or whomever that was that made the intro and share, like, follow up 6 months later and share what has happened since they made that intro. Like, thank you for making that intro. We've done X, Y, and Z with that brand. They're shouting not our praises, but they're shouting your praises because you put us in front of them, and building collaborations through genuine success stories. Again, you're trying to build long-term relationships here. And Rory, back to your question about like, how do we make sure this doesn't die in 5 years or 10 years from now? I think it's going to be so much more important that you establish relationships with 10 to 20 really, really strong players that you can partner with versus try to manage 300 partnerships at any given time. I think that way of building a network might be going by the wayside, and we need to be building more personalized, strong relationships with key players that can complement what you do rather than just try to go for any and all partners. I think that's gonna not help you in the long run.
Very good point. And that actually relates a little bit to Akshaya's question here in the chat, just around how do you actually build those relationships. What I heard from you, Eric, was really having a give first mentality, whether that's establishing the relationship, whether that's actually fostering it over time after that introduction is made. And maybe there's some real operational examples that you can provide here, because I'd love to open it up and really think about Outbound and taking that ecosystem-led approach. How do you actually operationalize it? Because I think everyone's bought into the idea of it, but what does this actually look like in the day-to-day for Crossbeam, for Pattern, for Atlan, for your teams? Any kind of examples or nuggets that people can take back to their organizations?
I go first. So the key thing, I think we've all heard the phrase, what gets measured gets managed. And so we do something called a funnel GPS call, which is kind of our North Star on, are we tracking towards our pipeline goals? And that's not just a sales call. It's a sales call plus a partnerships call plus a marketing call. And so we're all, obviously everyone has their kind of individual goals within it, but we're all driving towards the same pipeline goal. And within that, we're on a weekly basis tracking like, hey, how are we doing from a field generated pipeline perspective? And so to come back to the previous point, like we're one team. There's no individual person who's responsible for that. We're all tracking towards a field generated pipeline goal. And so we're just measuring on a weekly basis, how is every team, every individual doing, what's their mix of pipeline. But I think one important point I wanted to make is you don't need like we've now operationalized it into a great dashboard in Sigma, but we used to just have Google Slides and manually report it until we got to a place where we could operationalize it from a technical perspective. And the funny thing is we spent like 3 weeks trying to figure out how to get better data out of Gong's API. And our founder one day just said, can we just manually track it and spend 30 minutes every week doing it? So I think that the first and most important piece is measure, like setting the goal and measuring against it on a weekly basis is what I'd say.
I'll chime in here. I've never worked for a company that puts as much focus in good data as I have with Pattern. And that's not just data to help the brands that we work with grow. That's also data in the accounts that we want to be working with. We have a really sophisticated, built out RevOps team, sales engineering team, and going back to like Outbound and the BDR function, organizationally, we recently just did a reorg where all of our BDRs have essentially, the BDR team has been dissolved, and the BDRs are now have been now promoted and kind of transitioned into an inside sales role. And now each BDR is assigned to a sales rep. It's going to be a one-to-one relationship. And instead of saying you have these thousands of accounts that you're chasing, the organization has decided to say, these are your 50 that we are calling conviction accounts that we feel like are the best of the best in your patch to chase. And here's sales rep, here's another 50, and here's another 50, here's another 50. So at any given time, every one of our sales reps can only ever have 50 accounts that they're hyper focused on. And the inside sales rep, their whole world for the past, who knows how many months and years they've been working here has been, how many cold calls can I get? How many emails can I get? How many first meetings can I get? How much pipeline can I create? Now their only goal is net new revenue. So they're completely in line with what the sales goal is, which is bookings. And because of that, back to your point, Andrew, as far as like alignment goes, partnerships just kind of in lockstep align with what's ultimately important with sales. And so now the thing that's important to us on the partnership side of things are the 50 accounts for this person and 50 accounts for this person. And it makes things extremely, I wouldn't say easy, but a lot more efficient to say, this week I'm working with this sales rep on these accounts, and I'm no longer worried about how many meetings have I got. I just know the end goal is bookings. And so we got to get really, really smart about who the referral partner we should use should be, the partner we should use, the technology company we need to kind of bring in. And it's going to be interesting to see how this progresses. But as we, I think in the past have focused more on the partnership side, knowing who our targets are, and then getting really smart about only chasing those ones. I don't think there's going to be any CEO in the world on this call or not on this call that listens to this that wouldn't agree that at the end of the day, if the revenue goal is X, if we get there through, a few accounts versus many accounts, if we hit that target with quality accounts and quality customers, that's what it's all about. And so on the partnership side, we get the luxury of really hyper focusing on the right referrals from the right partners to the right accounts. But I think organizationally, as we go back to like the operational side of things, if you don't know who you're chasing and why, it gets more and more challenging to have an ecosystem actually work for you. So
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I don't think we would be successful if we hadn't really defined 18 months ago our ICP. And I know that sounds, I may just keep saying obvious things on this conversation, but we spent a lot of time looking at the characteristics of all our customers across firmographics, across industry, across size, across team structure, across tech stack. And there were very, very clear patterns. And then we looked at closed loss data, and there were also clear patterns there, which then informed, and we got very prescriptive. It's like, hey, it's 1,000 to 20,000 with this tech stack. And we continuously iterate on it, but with this tech stack. And then from there, that makes being ecosystem driven a lot easier, because you're kind of fishing with a spear gun in a sense. And then once you do that, and you're very, very clear on, here are my top 1,000 or 2,000 accounts that we're going after as a company, then you could do things that don't scale, which, as an example, you can go, like, we sponsored, I think, 38 partner QBRs this in the past quarter. And that's led to great relationships, and also eventually some customer conversations as well. And then the other thing that we're doing is, and I think Ryan's on this call, but just like sponsoring lunch for the customer of one of our partners, as an example. Very small, simple thing, but it's a way to provide value to their customers. I think ultimately, and there was a question on how do you approach, I think, Akshaya, you asked, how do we build a relationship before the ask? I think the reality is we're all in sales in some shape or form. And it's part of the gig, is like, I think you need to just operate from a position of trust and know that hope that and believe that your partners will do good. But my point in all of this is that if you start to, as an example, provide value to the customers or your partners, good things will come. And so it's not actually thinking about what's helpful for the partner, it's what's helpful for their customer. And if that's the lens that you look at things through, like maybe you run a workshop on your domain in a place that your partner is not an expert in, but they can be viewed as a value add to their customer because they're bringing something unique to them. So a lot of tangents, but I thought they're all relevant points.
And since I'm in marketing, I think it's time to bring up the dirty word attribution in this conversation, right? Because this is a case where sometimes we over focus on attribution instead of thinking about value, as Andrew is saying, or hitting that number as Eric brought up. One of the things that we did recently at Crossbeam and Crossbeam, obviously we drink our own Kool-Aid and using our ecosystem, but also we're a very strong PLG company. We have a lot of customers who are in the product, in the freemium plan, and so forth. And we do have a very strong marketing content program. And we were very particular that this is a product qualified account versus an ecosystem qualified account versus a marketing qualified account. And everyone was very protective of those sub-funnels. And now we take a completely different approach in the sense that it doesn't matter how an account gets prioritized for sales. What matters is, do we have the right signal, the right reason, the right trigger to reach out? And do we have something of value in our playbooks to give that prospect? So we completely turned that around. It is definitely a team sport. But our reps don't necessarily know that this account came from the product or through a marketing engagement or through a field event or through the ecosystem. But they're very clear that this is the reason why we're reaching out to them. And this is how we can provide value to them. And we're putting all our effort on those two, the signals and the playbooks, as we call them. So I wanted to share that in the sense that we're, even though in marketing, like I moving a little bit away from direct or attribution and thinking more holistically about how do we provide value and how do we hit this number.
That's interesting, Alex. So you're actually not disclosing to the BDRs or anyone reaching out where they came from, but you're actually more focusing on what value they can provide, regardless of what channel. Is that correct?
Correct. Like having the right context, right? Because we have some great accounts through a marketing engagement, through an event, or some great accounts because they're doing some great things in the product and seeing value there, or some accounts that are seeing a lot of value in the ecosystem. And, guess what? When you reach out, you shouldn't say, hey, I saw you download the white paper. How can I help you? Or I saw you that you signed up in the product. How can I help you? We want to take to the next level and actually do our best to provide value based on the information we have.
Interesting. That's super interesting. I really, really like that approach, and actually goes back to something you said, Eric, more around output over activity. So rather than focusing on how many cold calls a BDR has to make, it's really what's the end goal. It sounds like a very similar pattern in the sense of what's the end goal, is the value we're creating for them rather than the activity that they took to actually enter our pipe.
Somebody recently mentioned.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Somebody recently mentioned something in the chat that I thought was very spot on. Yeah, it was Steve that mentioning too often people equate ELG with having a channel strategy or being partner first, but having that niche focus on specific ecosystems and growing within those is a better approach. And I absolutely agree. And I have to sometimes like take my partnership hat off and realize that it really is like, you as an organization, what ecosystem are you existing in currently? And are you trying to force yourself into an ecosystem that may not be the best fit for you just because you want to, or there's like big fish over there? Something that, and actually I come from believe it or not, before I got into ecom, I was medical school bound. So my degree is actually in biology. So I can kind of relate this to, like, if you think about an animal or some kind of, creature that's in an ecosystem that really shouldn't be there, it's called an invasive species, right? And sometimes we want to eradicate those. And I think it's important that we as an organization insert ourselves into where you fit best. And it's interesting what you can learn from your existing customer base as to really where you live and where you should be living. And so over the years at Pattern, we've been more and more trying to understand what are the tech and the players and the individuals and the consultants that a lot of our brands are currently engaged with? Why are they engaged with those people, with those technology companies in those regions? What are the shows they're attending? And it's just one of those things where you have to just be, and it's so simple, like being where your customers are, but like letting your customers kind of tell you the ecosystem you should be in, and then just play into that. And something else that an exercise that we did, kind of going back to the tactical, I recently reached out to our chief technology officer and information officer and just asked, of all the technology that Pattern is using, can you send me a list of all that tech and who our points of contact are at those technology companies? So all of our vendors basically at Pattern that we're partnered with. And I started looking at all the lists and I was like, hey, why are we not getting them to sponsor an event? Why aren't we sponsoring their event? Why aren't we going where they're going? Like, these are tools that we're already using internally, and they've got customers that I want to be our customers, but I don't think those customers know that we and that vendor are engaging. Like, and so it's just an interesting exercise to like narrow down, like what's just like, I think our internal ecosystem can tell us a lot. Where are our customers? What are the tools we're already using? And then just go as deep as you can with what you already have and not try to force things that, or force areas where you shouldn't be playing in.
I want to quickly second that, because there is a tremendous point here. Sometimes, and going back to Steve's point, that sometimes we equate ELG with having a channel strategy or co-sell or co-marketing. Even the value of the data you have in your ecosystem, as Eric, you're saying, just looking at the data and knowing that this prospect already bought this tech from this partner of ours. This is a very strong intent signal, very specific to your company, and very, very actionable, whether you want to involve a partner to go after that account or not. So this is sometimes there is that confusion that ELG means co-selling, and it's not just co-selling.
Yeah, I think the point I was going to make, coming back to your earlier conversation, Alex, around product qualified and et cetera, is it, and this comes back to ICP, which is there's a universe of accounts that your company should want to sell to at any given point in time. And so the way we identify that, we create a stage one if we have a meeting booked. And then we only track stage two and beyond, but what that enables us to do is, like, there is this universe of stage ones that we're always trying to engage with. And maybe the timing is not right, but what enables us to do is then we layer in ecosystem data, and then we'll identify, oh, they bought Snowflake after a few months, they weren't ready at that time. That's a good trigger for us to go and reach back out. And so it all comes back to data, and we're a data company, so maybe we're overly we overly index on it. But you need to use a mix of external data, which could be this kind of partner-driven intent data, paid data, and then your kind of internal engagement data to create a holistic score of the accounts to go after. So, and this is kind of tangential, but there's a bunch of companies that are doing stuff in this space, like Actively AI is a company that we're looking at. And so this all kind of ties back to the beginning of the conversation, which we were saying, why is Outbound not working? It's because you're not using all the available data and signals in your favor. Like, that's the bare minimum at this point. So I think and maybe just like a broader point, since I know we have about 15 or so minutes left, is this isn't just top of funnel. These are your existing opportunities. So constantly engaging with partners for your existing opportunities and customers, because a really nice flywheel starts to happen. If you're partner driven, your sales approach, you're delivering a solution and a stack, to come back to the point earlier, that the customer is implementing to solve a business problem, which in turn drives adoption and ultimate value, which means they buy more. And then once they buy more, they talk about it to the ecosystem, and it kind of continues.
That's a super important point, Andrew. And it really is the flywheel then. Yes, we're talking about outbound in the context of the majority of this conversation, but really ELG extends to your entire life cycle. Very important point. And you mentioned a certain tool that you're evaluating. So curious from the three of you, what kind of tech stacks are you using to actually execute this ELG outbound approach?
Crossbeam.
There we go. There's a Crossbeam.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So I'm thinking 2025, and obviously we're now at that point in 2024 where we're all evaluating the services we've been using this year. Are we going to use those for next year? And what are the new ones we're going to use for next year? And as I think about my strategy, I think about like basically I try to bucket partnerships into two buckets, and I wish more organizations would do this, even including ourselves sooner, which is we have something called the daily contributor bucket, and then we have just like the long-term partner strategy bucket. And in my case, in my world, and this is actually, in my opinion, a good thing. But when like we also use Crossbeam, but a lot of times the partnerships I have in Crossbeam, I'm 3, 6, 9, 12 months out in a strategy oftentimes with how I'm utilizing my partnership relationships in Crossbeam. I'm looking at these dinners we're doing together, looking at overlaps and mutual prospects and understanding what shows we should be doing together. But it's more or less like working with our partner marketing team with a lot of those partners, various sponsorships. Yes, we're going to have like the, reciprocity, going. But I don't rely on my technology partners in Crossbeam to help me hit my number on a monthly basis. And that's not a bad thing. Maybe, and there's gonna be a lot of people that probably feel differently about that, but that's just for us. But the daily contributor side, I use, I think, a very complementary product to Crossbeam, which is called Cabal. And that tool allows me to identify individual contributors. So on this call, for instance, Alex, you're connected to who knows how many people on LinkedIn, and same with you, Andrew and Sophie. There's a good chance that, Sophie, you worked with someone 5 years ago and now they work at a brand and they're a contact that we've been chasing for a while. And you might be able to help me get introduced to that person through your personal relationship that you had with them 5 years ago. Cabal is that tool that can help me identify individual people's connections on LinkedIn and how it overlaps with the accounts that we're chasing. I have a very lofty number on a monthly basis, and if it wasn't for knowing who, and at Pattern we have 1,700 employees. All of our Pattern employees are also connected to Cabal, where I'm able to see how our employees that come from great backgrounds as well, how they can help us get introduced to different brands and whatnot. And so that tool just helps me chase kind of the day-to-day. I've got a team where all they do is they're doing that side of things, kind of the daily contributor, and then I'm focusing more on kind of the long-term strategy. And that might change for next year, but it's been going well, kind of doing that strategy.
First of all, I love Cabal. I've used it in the past. So, and it is a different type of ecosystem, right? It's the ecosystem of contributors or the people who are close to you, the contacts that are close to you. On our side, talking about tech stack, we do have third-party enrichment tools. We do track first-party data from the product and the website using Segment for that. We are using Crossbeam, but probably our biggest investment in the marketing tech stack is our data stack. We do use Snowflake as the analytics database, and that is a big investment. And we're using ETL tools and reverse ETL tools to get data into Snowflake, process it, and then take it out to the systems of engagement. I don't regret the amount of money we're paying to Snowflake and the whole data stack, because that gives us insights, not just in the marketing team, but also in sales and RevOps and product team as to what's happening and when, and how we can get those signals right, and how can we get the value the customer is looking right. And sometimes we use the data to get back to a customer and present them with something about their business that they may not be aware of. So if you are to spend budget strategically, I will always put it on a data stack. And no coincidence that the two companies here are both in the data space, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think just a couple of things in addition to everything everyone's mentioned. ZoomInfo is probably our big data tool two other, I think the one thing to highlight, it's not acceptable to not be relevant with all the available information out there and with Gen AI. So a tool that we're doing kind of a smaller trial, but a tool I just put in the chat, a tool that I've been a really big fan of, and I know the partnerships team use it a lot, is this tool called Poggio, which is account research at scale. And so you can personalize it to what your product does and your use cases, but it'll read 10Ks and investor reports and the website and build a clear account point of view. And then I mentioned this one earlier, but we're piloting something called Actively, which I'll also put in the chat, which basically aggregates all the different signals in your organization across Gong, Outreach, Gmail, et cetera, Salesforce, et cetera, which we use all those tools, and then is prescriptive on when and how to reach out to people and what the message should be.
And this might sound so like 2023, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. But ChatGPT has helped me in a lot of different ways in helping me know why or why not I should. And again, this is just putting my partner hat on here, but why and how or if I should partner with a certain organization. And it's been fascinating to see GPT evolve over the last year, looking at my chats from last year versus this year, how smart it's getting. But basically being able to say, like, here's who Pattern is. This is the company I'm looking to partner with. Here's the type of companies that they work with. I'm building out a 12-month strategy to partner with them to accomplish X, Y, and Z. Help me understand or lay out a strategy that if I were to present this to the CEO, would get their attention. And it's really awesome to see if you know how to ask, obviously the best inputs produce the best outputs. But if you know the right questions to ask and you kind of understand what your goals are and what you're shooting for, I've been able to pump the brakes on relationships or conversations that I would have otherwise leaned into and put fuel on the fire on others by getting answers to things that I didn't even think of. So yeah, just another hack, I guess, that I've been using. And it's been awesome to be able to go to a partner and say, here's all the ways I think we can work together. And I rip it out in, an hour, and they're expecting something in 2 weeks, and we can move pretty quickly. So just another hack.
Nevertheless, let me be the one to say that Gen AI is going to, affect Outbound, and it's going to be the big equalizer, right? So every rep now is a pretty good rep, either because they're an AI agent or they have a co-pilot to get that information. So the question still remains: how do you stand out? And one of the benefits of an ecosystem-led approach is that having built those relationships with your ecosystem and having that intelligence that no one else has, this is a terrific data set to go back to personalize, to create the right segments of the accounts and personalize your outreach. So you're actually operationalizing the trust you build at scale, which sets you apart in a world where everyone can write a great email nowadays. They don't, by the way, but they could.
Yes. And hopefully we'll see more of that. That's fantastic. Well, I know we just have a couple minutes left. So any last questions, thoughts, feel free to drop them in the chat, or Eric, Andrew, Alex, jump in. For now, I'm going to pop the speakers' LinkedIns into the chat. This is Eric, Alex, and Andrew. So feel free to connect with them there. Best place to find everyone is on LinkedIn. Eric, Alex, Andrew, this has been fantastic. Any closing thoughts or any kind of additions that we want to throw on?
I think I was just gonna say, if you're not doing anything today, pick one partner and one strategy and start small, and just continue to experiment and iterate. It could be potentially overwhelming, but keep it simple and small to start before you kind of do things at scale. would be my key thing. So when we started, we really just focused on Snowflake for the most part. And then we figured out what worked, what didn't, and then we started expanding up to other partners.
It's a great point. And a chasm that oftentimes is the one people are trying to cross is, yes, we're bought into it. We see that kind of more sophisticated end goal. How do we actually get there? So that's a great stepping stone. Great advice, Andrew.
And to add to that, there is a chasm. We track companies that do have, partnerships and can work with partnerships, and companies that are actually using data to really work with partnerships. And it's only 10% of the companies that do have some partner ecosystem that are actually using data and sharing data with partners to do the things that Andrew and Eric described in this call. So we're still in the beginning of this journey. There is so much more to come. And if you're in that 10%, that's great. You can differentiate right now, but I do expect more and more companies to be sharing data and leveraging system growth.
Yeah, and one thing I'll end with that I've seen develop a pattern over the last couple of years is we've really gone from like having just a revenue number goal around how ecosystems helped hit that revenue number to truly building a culture of an ecosystem-led approach. And this is kind of a plug for Crossbeam, but something that we've recently incorporated into Salesforce is across all of our target accounts, we now have a report that also shows all of the partners that we have in Crossbeam and how they overlap with the accounts that we're chasing. And it makes it really easy for now sales reps to go into that report and say, this is the account I'm chasing. I see that these 5 partners we have in Crossbeam are currently working with that, brand. Eric, can we spend 10 minutes and just talk through like how we can use this information to help us? And this has truly helped our company de-silo partnerships and sales and BD and marketing by bringing partner information into places where we're all living, in our case, Salesforce. And that's just one example. There's many, but it's I think that is kind of the name of the game in this day and age, is like, if you're trying to have a successful ecosystem-led approach, you have to start building a culture around it, and people need to be aware of what your ecosystem is and who they are.
That is a fantastic point to end on. Thank you, Eric. And thank you everyone for joining us today on this Tuesday. Appreciate the time. We will be circulating a recording afterwards in case you want to share it with anyone or anyone wasn't able to attend. And of course, Eric, Alex, Andrew, thank you very much for sharing your insight today.